Okay, my name is Sawyer Fuller. I'm an assistant professor of mechanical engineering here, and I'll be chairing this final afternoon session. So first on our list is Kevin Green, and I'll pass it on to Kevin now. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot. So hi, my name is Kevin Green. I'm a PhD candidate in robotics at Oregon State University. And today I'm going to be talking about our work on blind bipedal stair locomotion. So we've heard a bit about CASI and some of the locomotion work we've done. And we think about our lab, we're really looking at what are the big problems with bipedal locomotion that prevent these rails from being useful in the world. And one of the key locations where bipeds have a big use case is in human-centric environments. We've designed so much of the world around our topology. We've put stairs everywhere, ranging from, this is Oregon State's campus, our mechanical building, and that's a trail deep in the Oregon mountains where we built in stairs. And so we really want to figure out how can we approach these. And so we thought, when I walk up to one, if I had my eyes closed and I walked up to a flight of stairs, I'd fall on my face. So we said, well, of course, you're going to need some vision. So what we did is we added the minimal precision stack that we thought we could get a hold of. So here's 7 LiDAR beams, and we trained a controller that used them. So where it's able to go up and down, it should know roughly where the stairs are. It's all the information you need. You don't need full 1080p vision. And that worked. But there was one issue. We had a software bug. I'm sure everyone here who works with learning or software has messed things up, had weird things happen. This is a really weird bug, though, because what happened is we forgot to feed the sensors into the controller. We thought, well, how does that ever work? So something obviously really interesting is going on. So we backed up a bit. Our lab has both people working in machine learning, reinforcement learning, but also on the gate dynamics. So we started to think, what could you be doing in the gate that could allow you to do this kind of extremely robust behavior on these flights of stairs that you're not perceiving? And one key feature that we thought about is this thing known as swing leg retraction. So when humans and animals run, before your foot touches the ground, you reach it all the way forward and start to pull it backwards. And so there's a number of reasons why we could do this, and there's a lot of different things it does do. So for one, if you minimize the difference in velocity between your foot and the ground, you'll lower the impulse when you impact it, better on your joints, and you should lose less energy. But also, it has a really interesting effect on your gait dynamics by swinging the leg backwards at the touchdown point. So the classic video, which if you've seen any talks from our lab over the past 8 years, you may have seen this. This is a Monica Daly experiment that is super fundamental to how we understand what's happening in gait. So this is a guinea fowl that's running along, and they're sort of being prodded with a broom by a grad student behind it, and there's a tissue paper over a gap. So they think they're just running on flat ground, but then as soon as they try to put the foot on it, it breaks through. So what you're studying here is how does the bird respond to an error in perception? The ground is actually lower than it thought it was. What does it do? And a really interesting thing here is if you look at the leg angle, it's sweeping the leg angle back. And so you can illustrate this with some still frames that if you're up above the ground, you have a steep leg angle, and it sort of gets, or shallow, and it gets steeper and steeper as you swing it back. So what this does is it gives you what we call a preflex, a pre-computed reflex. So if the ground is higher, you get a shallow leg angle. If the ground's lower, you have a steeper leg angle. So you're basically able to react to ground without sensing it in any way. So you can alter your gait dynamics to make you be able to recover over the next couple steps. So we thought this was going on. So let's jump back now and look at sort of how this all appeared. So my background is more mechanical engineering. So I view a lot of these learning problems from more of a controls perspective. So here, this is what I sort of see. You have the control policy or actor, in this case an LSTM network, which sends an action through a PD target to the environment. You get back a state observation, and you act on it for future loops. Then as a control engineer, I get to design a reward function that then goes to the optimizer that optimizes the control policy. But interesting, you also get to shape the environment and the model through dynamics randomization and environmental randomization. So in this work, just like Jeremy's before, we didn't touch the reward. It's the exact same reward as the walking, skipping, jumping that Alan presented. And the only thing that's different here is not even the robot dynamics, it's the same robot randomization, so the mass parameters are all similar to Alan's work, or that work Alan presented. It's just the environment randomization. What we did is we gave it plateaus of staircases to go against. So that's the only thing we're changing is the environment it interacts with. Random numbers of stairs, random landing widths, random stair sizes, ground slopes, distance to it. Because that's one interesting thing with these, in my mind, is that because our network is an LSTM network, it is insanely good at actually picking out little details or information leaks because it can look at the whole history. So if you start at 1 meter away from the stairs every time, it can figure that out. It can know that zeros means zeros or whatever your initialization states are means I'm this far from it. So by randomizing all these things very carefully, we can create these distribution environments for it to learn on. And it produces some really awesome behaviors. So this is the part of the talk where I just show a lot of videos. So one of the interesting things about it, though, it's extremely robust, but it has no idea how to place 1 foot per stair. Because it can't see them, it can't sense if it's centered or at the front or the back of each step. So you see a lot of these things where it will slip off a stair, step backwards, but it kind of knows it's going up, so it puts it much farther down, and it's able to recover. Or it'll like vault a couple stairs coming down them. And so when you see it get 1 foot per stair, that's sort of just the luck of the stepping frequency and the speeds lining up to give you that kind of motion. And some more videos. And we found it even extrapolated to at least single step downs well outside of the training distribution, or 1 foot always up, 1 foot always down. It was able to handle that pretty cleanly. Or even things that aren't really stairs. So here's a nice slow motion of that phenomenon where it doesn't quite make it up a step. So we see here it's about to catch this toe. And it tries to put force on the heel, but it's not on the stair. It'll catch itself, and Jeremy and John, trying to support it with the pole, are trying to react as quickly as they can. And it's able to make its way back up. And so coming back, we had this idea that swing leg retraction is part of what's going on. So we can actually inspect these behaviors. So we can't really tell what it's doing. This is a giant black box. But we can at least look at what it's chosen to do. So here we can look at what the swing foot path is doing in the world space. And so we're going to compare it to the swing path from the flat ground policy. So the ones that are trained, everything the same, just on flat ground. Picks the leg up higher. That makes perfect sense. But I think the most interesting part is around touchdown, it's coming down much steeper. And if we look at that in the body frame, similar to that Monica Daly plot, we can see that around 0 seconds, which here is the level ground touchdown time, that we do have a faster leg swing retraction rate. It's more prominent. And that's similar, of course, to this plot. And so this is really exciting to see, but we can't say this is what's making it work. There's lots of different things it figured out, but it's just really exciting to me to be able to see some behaviors come out of these reinforcement learning problems that are biologically recognizable. All right. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your time and ask you any questions.
Questions for the speaker?
Did you figure out the LiDAR situation and then did a comparison?
No. I'm trying to remember if we actually trained any with the LiDAR after we figured out we weren't using it. That'd be a question for Jonah. He did a lot of the reinforcement learning work. He was the first author, as I didn't mention. Big shout out to him. He's working with Agility Robotics now. Yeah, at least we didn't do a really rigorous comparison if we actually trained one.
Pretty cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. So I remember thinking back to what Alan was talking about, how with some of the different gate profiles, if you use the standard blocking controller as your base point, you can bootstrap the learning, right? And basically, I'm wondering if you guys have considered using curriculum learning style approaches then for these types of problems where you can start to scale up from a known working gait trajectory to, say, very severe stair cases by just increasing the severity of the steps that it's facing time to time.
Yeah, we're definitely thinking a lot of these sort of things. I mean, there's so much opportunities for playing around with the structure, ranging from curriculums, bootstrapping, creating modules to separate out different parts, learning skills, and then transferring them on different tasks. So there's a lot of really cool opportunity there, let alone getting into any sort of model-based or online learning. I mean, we're sort of just scratching the surface of what you can do with sort of the most brute force techniques. But thanks.
Okay, let's thank our speaker. Our next speaker is Halai Dewan. My apologies for not saying that right.
So hopefully this is our last lecture series on CASI learning. So we've been talking about a lot reinforcement learning on CASI domain. And today I'm going to present our work on sim-to-real learning of footstep constrained bipedal dynamic walking. So this is our work towards this year's ICRA. And just a little bit recap what we just saw earlier in the day, and just what Kevin showed you guys. We have CASI using reinforcement learning methods, showing great locomotion behaviors across different kind of scenarios. So we have stairs, we have CASI carrying different kind of loads, robustly walking forward, and we have CASI doing kind of different gait patterns, different timing of the feet on the ground. So they share some common greatness from these policies. So they're so robust to different kind of disturbances. Either it's ground disturbances or it's the disturbances coming from the unsensed load. And also, one interesting note is these policies, they have the entire freedom of where to place the feet. So in order to maintain balance and become so robust in the real world, they are free to place the feet anywhere it wants to do to maintain balance. We're interested in how to make these learning methods more practical towards real-world problems. So especially when the environment becomes constrained, like stairs. So what if CASI wants to step up one staircase at a time, or two staircases at a time, or it wants to go across these stepping stones? So what can we do to make sure that CASI safely land in the end? And so to be able to handle such constraints, the robot and the controller, they have to satisfy a couple goals here. So first, they have to reach to a target footstep at every time. They have to be able to do that. And second, they have to understand controller's capabilities of where it can control the robot to land. So it has to build up this knowledge of, if I'm taking a footstep right now, where I'm going to land actually, and where I'm able to take more footsteps in the future. And on top of these, there has to be some sensing mechanisms. So like a perception or any sensing mechanism that tells how the nearby terrain looks like. So in this work, we're really trying to figure out a control hierarchy towards this goal by addressing the first 2 points. So for the first point, we wanted to have a control policy that is conditioned on the footstep. So we abstract the policy to kind of, we can tell the policy where CASI wants to land, and we can send this command to the policy, and the foot will actually land to that particular touchdown location. So we try to abstract the policy training around the footstep commands, and we train this policy in simulation. As we saw earlier, we have this sim-to-real pipeline built up, and we're able to train CASI to learn a range of footstep locations. And this policy explicitly takes in footstep commands as kind of step angle and direction as the inputs to the policy. So these commands are represented as the immediate next touchdown location for the robot. So in other words, it means that the policy only knows one footstep command in front of it. And the video basically shows we're able to train this policy in simulation. And similarly, with the help of dynamics randomization, we're able to deploy the trained policies onto the hardware. But one thing to notice here is the underlying control is footsteps. It's not speed of the body. So we're just commanding the footsteps relative to that walking direction, such as forward walking or side walking. And we're also, so being able to train these policies, we have some unique properties coming out from the policy too. So first, we can see that, hold on, the video is now playing. So first of all, we see that the robustness remains in these policies. So if we command Cassie to step in place, as the left video supposed to show, Cassie will actually step in place while remaining having a step length of 0. So it's on even terrain underneath, but it's able to maintain balance and try to maintain a body upright posture. And second video on the right actually shows Cassie can do some intentional footstep maneuvers, such as going forward half meter at a time, doing this 1-2 step gathering motion. And so when we have the policy trained to be able to land at some particular foot touchdown locations, the next step we think about is how do we build up this knowledge to actually have a kind of multi-footstep behavior and approach stairs, approach to stepping stones better, so the dynamics will work out the way through the constraints on the ground. One way to do that is we try to train this transition model that try to predict the step accuracy given the robot states. So this is the fact that we already have the trained policy. We just source the data offline and forward simulation this policy many times. And we can build up this transition model, basically mapping the robot dynamic states into the step accuracy. And this video basically shows that step accuracies are updated at every touchdown. So the green shows that if the robot would have chose that command, those are the command with high accuracies to land, and the red shows the other way. So given this information, we can kind of recursively build up this for multi-steps in the future. And the nature of this prediction also aligns really well with the terrain information, kind of square-like, and it kind of overlap together in the same language. So far we've been covered the work towards ICRA, and these are kind of the new work we have recently. So we show this policy train and it can be transferred on hardware, but it's kind of open loop behavior. We can't tell how well the policy is being executed online. So in order to evaluate this policy in the real world, we actually add a overhead camera to tell these available footstep targets on the treadmill. So we use these marker fiducials to tell that available footsteps. And along with this camera setup, we kind of decompose the network into a useful structure where the proprioceptive states or the joint states are fed into this dynamic module. And we can use some earlier trained policies that you guys saw earlier. We can take those policies, but only the blue part, and then use it as the bootstrap to train a new task, such as a footstep policy here. And also, the policy directly controls the step timing. So step timing is really important to actually fully exploit the robot dynamics when the touchdown location is constrained. So in here, we actually see the emerging behavior that when we increasing the commands for stepping further, the swing time actually increases. So which is very aligned to what we do as we walk forward. And as a result, Cassie can walk through this stepping stone environment. So we're able to show Cassie is able to walk across the stepping stone environments, and this kind of slow down motion. And using this code pipeline and reinforcement learning, we're really kind of show that reinforcement learning is capable of doing this positioning motions while doing highly dynamic maneuvers. And this kind of ensures us we can build upon the previous work and then do more interesting planning work on top of this. That's it. Any questions?
Nice work.
Yeah.
question?
What type of constraints do you have on the footsteps of where you're telling them to be at the next spot? Like, obviously you can't do it too far away. Do you have a defined set of those?
Yeah, so right now we just have it as uniform sampling around a reasonable range of locations around the robot. But we could do is we can add a more simplified model to infer a kind of a reasonable range to sample from, which could help as well. Yeah.
Is there a camera on Cassie for, so cause you have everything at like above it, right? So there's no camera on Cassie to like find this pose here.
No, so we use that overhead to project where Cassie is and where the available footsteps are. And in the future work, we hope that we have an onboard camera to detect these fiducials or other kind of meaningful footstep locations.
Thank you. Thanks for the good questions. And let's thank our speaker. Thank you. Our next speaker is Jonathan Tremblay.
Is it recording?
Okay.
So hi, I'm Jonathan. I'm here to talk to you about pose estimation. So this was some work we're presenting at ICRA. Yinzu is the sole soldier on this work, so it's very exciting to present this work. So for robots to sort of manipulate and interact with their world, they need to somewhat understand what's going on in front of them and what's in front of them. We're really interested in that category level of pose estimation, so things that kind of look similar, right? So mugs, shoes, cereal boxes. So we're going to look into how we can do pose estimations of these kind of categories and what sort of challenges are brought to the problem of pose estimation. So in general, pose estimation has been kind of approached in sort of specific instances. So if I have an object that I know, like the cracker box, I have a 3D model of that cracker box. How can I find that cracker box in 3D? So where is it like in rotation, translation with respect to a camera? So if I know that and I know the 3D model, then I can write a controller with my robot and go pick it up. So different methods like PoseCNN, PVNet had different ways of kind of expressing that problem in order to find, in the end, the pose of a known object. And most of them will use like a CAD model in order to do that. When you kind of extend to the category level where you have more of things that are similar but kind of different, so you can't not have a specific 3D model for each of the instances of mugs that you can encounter in the world. So some people have proposed the normalized object coordinate space to sort of have like this kind of normalized way of representing objects. But they still require kind of a CAD model to understand these objects. So we're going to sort of focus more on the data-driven approach using the using key points and using a real-world data set to train our pose estimators. So these are all the mugs in our lab that we're running and we're detecting in real time. So let's look into the kind of how we're doing this. So we're going to represent all of our objects as points. So this is from a paper, objects as points. So if we're looking at this chair, for example, the centroid of the chair is going to be where we're going to have a detection. Then from that detection, we're going to place some information on top of it, right? So we're going to get the bounding box where some key points are, and we're going to have different ways of expressing these key points. So let's look at some of that detail. So from the image, feature extraction, like VGG, ResNet, then from that latent representation, then we're going to get some more specific information, like in red, the center that we saw as a heat map, but also as a sub-pixel offset, so where is it within the pixel, and the 2D bounding box. And then the key points are the 8 corners of the volume that represent the object. We'll have an example of that. And then the relative dimensions. So one of the problems when you do pose estimation of categories is that you don't necessarily know how big the object is going to be. Right? So there's going to be some dimensions that you're not going to know. So you, like, for example, different mugs are going to be of different width and height. So you need to figure out a prediction to say, oh, this has to be this size. So in order to be able to fully solve the pose estimation problem. So here's an example, kind of different representations that we have. So like I said, this is a volume, the 8 corners of a cuboid that has all the object inside. So we have a displacement. So for the center, how many pixels to the left or to the right, at the top or bottom, is specific key points. And we also have a heat map. And what we're doing is we combine both of these representations together through uncertainty matching to figure out where the volume is specifically. So you can see on the left, the blue is pretty good, and you're losing the heat map, which is a little bit in red. Here you can see it. And on the right-hand side, the heat map is doing better than the displacement of the key points. So in order to propagate information better, in order to do pose estimation, we kind of came up with this idea that information that is simpler at the top should propagate at the lower kind of sections of the model. So like the center of the object should be pretty straightforward to find, whereas the key points of the heat map a little harder, and then the relative cuboid size also should be a little harder. So what we did is these G that you see is a convolution GRUs that we're sending information from the top to the bottom. We're hoping to learn a function that will propagate that information. And then you can ask yourself the question, is this really working? This is a little harder to see because it's in 3D, but you have this book and we're doing it from a single view perspective, and you get the ground truth in green, and in blue it's with convolution GRUs, and red it's without it. But you can see that the thickness is a little better estimated with the convolution GRUs than without it. All right, so this is the whole pipeline of our pose estimation system. So again, feature extraction. From the extractions, we're going to extract some information about the object, where is the object, the center, the 8 key points that represent the volume, the relative dimensions of that volume. And now how are we going to solve for finding the 3D pose? Because right now, how we've done so far is find things in 2Ds, right? Where are things in the image? Plus some relative dimensions, which is kind of an abstract concept. So we're going to use these 2D outputs, the camera as intrinsics, and then because we know how the key points have to be arranged in 3D with the width and height of the object and length, that's the cuboid dimension, then we can use perspective endpoint to reproject, to solve for the unknown of rotation and translation. Okay. So when we take this and then we bring it to the Objectron dataset, which is the dataset we use to train our model, it came out about 1.5 years ago, maybe. So we're going to have at the top ground truth, at the bottom our method, and it looks fairly good, but really any good computer vision paper should need a table. So our table is better than the other method that Google developed, so we're very happy. So let's look at some, also that's their method on the left, our method. Same thing. So because it's a robotics conference or curriculum, we're going to talk about robots. So here's a robot in Redmond. So we decided to go see if we can go do some grasping. So just to show you that the poses are pretty good. So here the mug is within the cusp of the robot. And you can see in 3D on the right in RViz that the actual pose is kind of staying where it should be. So it should be enough for doing some grasping. Hey, so you can see here we have some matching. So shoes, poses are being matched by the robots on rotation and being placed to the left of the shoe. So Baxter is almost ready for cleaning my room. And then some more grasping with these being with a really big gripper, which really helps to be able to be successful. But boxes and mugs. Mugs was a little scary because these can break. So, again, it's a good gripper though, so fairly exciting. And then some shoes. All right, cool. Made it on time. Thank you. So. What's up?
So, did you check how the key point representation changes when there is occlusion?
Do you mean are they disappearing?
Yeah, like if there is something in front of the object.
Yeah, you can see here some occlusion. All right, so the shoe, it works fairly well. It will predict key points even if there's occlusion, right? Because it kind of learned kind of this idea of what the object is and how it looks. So if there's occlusion, it will add the key points where they should be. Because if you don't have these key points, you cannot run the perspective endpoint algorithm, right? So I think you need 4 or 5, and there's some other things like they can be on the same plane and things like that. What's up?
How do you go from the pose estimation to grasping?
How do I go from pose like these over here? Yeah, so it's all hard coded. So the robot goes 15 centimeters above the centroid, then it closes its gripper, then it lifts it up, and then put it in the garbage bin or something like that. But the next step would be to use the computer vision system and the learning method together to be able to do better grasp. Cool.
Felix, thank
you,
speaker.
How does this method fare towards like comparing it with both CNN or TextFusion, who have that?
Yeah. So for post CNN, because it's a specific instance of an object, so you will get not such a good pose in the end because post CNN is a little finicky. But you have to work with a very specific object, whereas here you can like pick any shoes. So all these shoes here were shoes that were not part of the training set. Right, so you could like download this, pick a shoe, put it in front of your robot, and then run the code and then pick it up. Whereas post CNN, you need to find the cracker box that it was trained on, and they've changed their commercial ads, and then they just changed all the things, and then it doesn't recognize it anymore because Cheez It has decided to go green instead of red or something like that. Thank you.
Next up is Ekta Salami, who successfully defended her generals this morning. Congratulations.
Thank you for the introduction, Professor. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Today, I'm going to present our work on object recognition in indoor environments using topologically persistent features. In the context of long-term autonomous robots, it is essential that object perception is robust to changing environmental conditions, such as lighting, background pose, etc. Therefore, in this work, we focus our attention to 2 research questions. First, we evaluate if state-of-the-art deep learning methods are robust to such variations by testing them in environments that are similar but not the same as their training environments. More importantly, we investigate how object shape information that is captured using topological features can be used to achieve higher robustness to such variations. So given a scene image, our goal is to recognize all the objects in the scene and using shape information. Our method consists of 2 modules, first of which is the segmentation map generation. To obtain object segmentation maps from a scene image, we perform foreground segmentation using a trained DeepLab v3+ model. And a shape-based object recognition method relies on object contour information to distinguish between different objects. But the number of foreground pixels in an image that is taken from a farther distance does not are few, and therefore a single pass through the network is not sufficient. So we have a 2-stage framework to essentially capture all object contour details. In the second module, which is our recognition module, we extract topological features from the segmentation maps. In order to do so, we transform the binary segmentation maps using height functions. So what we do is we choose a set of d directions. For each of the d directions, we obtain height function outputs. Height function essentially captures the distance of every pixel from a hyperplane defined by the chosen direction. We then construct cubical complexes from every height function output, and apply persistent homology, which is a tool that topological data analysis provides, to obtain persistence images. So these images right here. Note that at this point, for every segmentation map, we would have d persistence images. In every image, most of the pixels are 0. Therefore, we perform sparse sampling to extract an optimal set of pixel locations, concatenate all the sparse PI vectors, and then obtain one feature representation per segmentation map, which is then fed to a fully connected network for recognition. To evaluate the performance of this method, we first choose the widely used benchmark, which is the RGBD scenes dataset. It consists of multiple scenes shot in 5 different environments, of which we pick 2, one being the source environment where we train models, and second being the target environment where we test them. Let's go over results on this benchmark. So to evaluate how sparse PI features help in recognizing objects, we compare the performance of those features with features learned using ResNet and EfficientNet, which are widely used deep learning-based feature extractors. And we note that overall, sparse PI features lead to better recognition performance than features using ResNet and EfficientNet with respect to accuracy, recall, and F1 score. We also compare the performance of our proposed framework with end-to-end object detection methods like faster RCNN or FRCNN for short, and its domain adaptive counterpart, which is DAF RCNN. We note that in the unseen target environment, our methods outperform both of them with respect to accuracy and recall. While the RGBD scenes dataset has scenes from multiple environments, they are all tabletop environments with limited variation in terms of lighting. Therefore, we collect a new dataset, first in a living room setting with a variety of object poses, objects with similar shapes, different lighting conditions, and so on, as you can see in the figure. What we do then is we train models for our method as well as the end-to-end object detection methods and test them in using images from the same environment. In that case, we note that sparse PI performance is okay, even though faster RCNN and its domain adaptive counterpart do much better with respect to all the metrics. And this is expected because we know deep learning methods do well in the environments that they are trained on. We believe that the quality of our method is affected by segmentation maps from which we extract features. For example, the performance for a fork is considerably poor as compared to the other classes because fork is hard to segment. Despite this challenge, because sparse PI features capture shape information, we expect the performance to be relatively unaffected in a completely different environment, like this mock warehouse that we set up. And so we collect images in this setup and test models on this setup. We also deploy our method on a Locobot and test it in the warehouse environment. And on these warehouse images, we observed that performance of sparse PI features that were the models that were trained using living room images, the performance of sparse PI features remains unchanged, and performance of faster RCNN and the domain adaptive counterpart both reduces, especially in terms of accuracy, in the unseen warehouse environment. Let's look at some of the issues that are associated with the methods that we've covered. For sparse PI, we observe that the segmentation map quality affects performance, and that could be attributed to some of these reasons. For example, for objects like forks and spoons, segmentation maps can look very similar, or they may be incomplete due to segmentation errors. And varying camera poses can lead to same segmentation maps for different objects, which makes it difficult for a 2D shape-based method to distinguish between them. Variations due to large object and camera poses also affect end-to-end object detection methods. And of course, changes in object appearance is also something that deep learning-based methods are susceptible to. But despite all this, we see that our method performs well. So let's look at a video demonstrating results. We consider a setup of 5 objects in the warehouse and start from a distance of 1.5 meters. And we note that sparse PI recognizes all the objects correctly, whereas faster RCNN makes certain mistakes or detects extra objects. One might think that when images are taken from a shorter distance, performance might be better for faster RCNN. But even as the robot moves closer at a distance of 0.8 meters, sparse PI still recognizes objects correctly, whereas faster RCNN continues to make recognition errors. So this work was supported by an Amazon Research Award, so I should thank them. And I would like to conclude by going over some of the findings from this work. So we know that state-of-the-art deep learning methods perform extremely well in environments that they are trained on, but they are not robust to environmental variations. However, a shape-based recognition method that we developed using topological features shows greater robustness to such variation. This work appeared in IEEE RAL, and our dataset and code are also publicly available. Thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to take any questions. Sure. Yeah.
I'm curious if you do any like data augmentation on like topological feature maps. Because I can imagine for objects that are like symmetric, for example, that might help with robustness.
So since we extract, the question was if we do any data augmentation. So since we extract features from segmentation maps of the objects, so as long as we're capturing all possible orientations of that particular shape of a segmentation map, the features that we learn for recognition do not require any further augmentation. And so, yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you for the question.
How do you train your segmentation?
The segmentation was, so we used DeepLab v3 Plus model, which is one of the standard semantic segmentation models. So we did train that using supervised learning, and to sufficiently evaluate the recognition performance of features obtained from segmentation map, we basically ensure that segmentation map quality remains consistent through in both the environments that we're looking at.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Okay, let's thank our speaker.
Thank you.
Next, we have John Moreau.
Hello, everyone. I'm John. I'm a PhD candidate at Oregon State University. And I have a little bit of a different thing to show for this session. Instead of vision-based, I use a little bit of vision. I'm mainly doing a benchmark for 2D in-hand manipulation, and we use a human study protocol to study robot hand design, which might be a little weird. It's going to make sense as I go through it, I hope. Now, the big question that we're really aiming to solve here is that we want to know what the mapping between a robot hand's design and its ability to manipulate objects. I care about in-hand manipulation. Before we start and delve into manipulation, something has to be said for like why we want dexterous hands to begin with, right? If you just mount a really simple hand on a really complex arm, you can get a lot of manipulation. But when you're dealing with constrained environments, places where you want to minimize regrasping, want to reorient the object, in your hand, you're going to need a little more of a dexterous object, right? A really good example of this is like fruit picking. So for apples, you could talk to my colleague Nigel over there about apple picking more in depth. But you want to keep the stem on, right? So you have to pull and twist to get the right torsion to get the stem off. Otherwise, if the stem comes off, it's failed. No one wants to buy it. It makes it more susceptible to disease and stuff. So now let's go into manipulation a little bit. When I'm talking about manipulation, I'm talking specifically about precision manipulation using the distal link, no palm, like that. My kind of manipulation is going to be on a 2D surface, and it's basically looking at the relative movement between an object and a stationary palm. So this is all like fingers doing stuff to the object. And so when we're considering our like arm-hand system and how complex you want things to get, what you'll be asking is kind of like what kind of hand should I use with what kind of complexity and capabilities, and how should we use it for the arm and the situation that we have, right? But the problem is that we need to understand what the hand is capable of first. when we look at a robot hand, I break it into 3 parts. There's more, but this is, if you look at any robot hand, it's going to have this, right? The morphology, so the build of the hand itself. The actuation, so the motors and perhaps the tendons or whatever is actually moving those fingers. And then the software, so the thing that actually does stuff with the hand, whatever you want to do, right? So I care about morphology, but the problem is that morphology is tightly coupled to actuation. I mean, think about it. If you don't put motors on a hand, it's not going to move. And that's just it, right? That's the problem that I want to solve because I care about that. Finding out what the hand itself, kind of what that potential does it bring, right? So previous work, I highlight 2 here: manipulability, co-design for manipulation works that they look at what a hand can do in terms of like manipulation tasks is what I care about, but they don't look at characterizing the hand specifically for manipulation. Manipulability is kind of like an instantaneous, I'm at this position, with all these different parameters, what can I do? Co-designing for manipulation typically looks at optimizing a hand's design and control at the same time to do some trajectory, right? So we're not actually like getting a hand design and saying, okay, this has potential here, it's able to do this, yada, yada, right? So previous work, not my previous work, Ian Bullock and Aaron Dollar there, kind of made a taxonomy for primitive in-hand manipulation movements, right? And so what we did is we took that and made a metric I call it the asterisk test. Basically, you have all these different directions in the form of an asterisk, and you just try to move the hand in each direction, right? And we keep track of how well that the hand moves the object in that whatever desired direction that we have there. And then we compare that to the ideal, which is the dotted line, right? This is an object-centric approach compared to a lot of other approaches, we don't have time to go into them, that kind of look at it from a task-based way of metricizing the hands. And so what this makes us able to do is we're able to compare robot hands to each other, and it makes it pretty versatile. We'll get into that in a second. So again, just to show this in bigger, the hand is physically moving the object as far as possible in each direction while trying to stay along those dotted lines as much as possible. And I think I already mentioned this. When we get that data, the trajectory, we run several metrics on it. So first off, we care about the distance that it went in that desired direction, which is generally just the projection of the trajectory onto that path there. We're looking at the efficiency, so we take the trajectory, we look at the total distance, and then look at the arc length to see efficiency there, Frechet distance, maximum error, and then maximum rotation achieved in the trial. So just going back, we have this problem again where morphology is tightly coupled to the actuation and the software, right? One way that we are going about this is we're going to replace the actuation and the software with a human study design. So enter something we call physical human interactive guidance. The basic premise of this is you have a dummy hand with no motors, and you have a human subject who literally puppets the hand to do whatever we want it to do, right? We've demonstrated this before for, top here is for grasping, and this one is for other manipulation tasks. And the really nice thing about this is that it has really high transparency inside the task. As a human puppeting this, you have so much feedback about the force and everything that's going on in the interaction. You don't need the actuation of software, so we're able to look more at the hand design. And if we use the same human subject across multiple hand designs, we get some sort of a look at, we get some sort of level of normalization, right? And we're also able to, with the human subject, approximate a high level of performance that the hand can do. So to kind of get like the upper potential of what this hand might do. Now, yeah, there we go. In our study, we had several constraints. First off, the subject can't break contact after it's established. Rolling and sliding contacts are allowed. and the subjects have to stay on the side they contacted. So this is a really interesting case here where our human subject decided that the best way to move the object down, which actually it is from what we found, is to contact and then have the, slide the contact down. And they have to do this kind of side-to-side motion in order to actually get the contacts the way they want. Okay, so one last thing is that when we have different hands, right, we can't really compare this physical human interactive guidance performance on the asterisk test because the space of the hand is different, like what space the hand has influence over, right? And so so here's two examples that I'll show data for. So what we do instead is we normalize that space. So we get we measure how far the hand can reach and how wide it can reach, how wide the fingers can open, really. And then we use that to normalize the space and also to get object size and initial position normalized between all of our hands. So it's a more of a apples to apples comparison of what's going on. I have a poster on that, poster number 3 in the poster session, so you feel free to look. But anyway, so we ran a human study. I'm not going to talk about the specifics of that study yet, but we got a bunch of trajectories that we kind of averaged over this. The cool thing is that using this asterisk data, we're able to see kind of the vulnerabilities of what the hand design is, right? That the hand design brings to the table, right? So for instance, this one, it's just a basic parallel jaw gripper, moving the fingers side to side. Obviously, it shows that there. A little more of a nuanced thing here is that the lower hemisphere of this 2v2 hand, so 2 joints symmetrical, has higher error than the top. So you can expect with your arm-hand system that you probably want the arm to kind of compensate a little more when you need to move the object closer. And as I showed this before, humans really like sliding and rolling contacts. We did this on a bunch of hands. It showed up everywhere. And that's about it that I have for now. So we talked about the asterisk test as a way to characterize a hand's design for in-hand manipulation. We used humans puppeting the robot hands to avoid having to put actuation and sensors as extra variables to make this whole comparison more complicated. We used the hand measurements to kind of normalize the space. And then all together, we look at studying the effectiveness of robot hand morphology. So in the end, we want to add rotation, change up initial positions, object sizes, more hand designs, yada, yada. I'll stop there. Any questions? I don't know if we have
time for one question.
Yeah.
Why are you interested in the translational in-hand manipulation, but you don't have a metric for the rotational?
Yeah, that's just something we're adding. It's in a paper in review right now, actually. Yeah. All right.
Okay, thanks again.
Thank you.
All right. Hello, everyone. Since we are already on flying robots, we have seen a lot of walking robots, running robots, and a lot of ground robots. So switching to flying robots. This is the work that we did for ICRA 2020. I'm Daksh, and I'm from Autonomous Insect Robotics Lab. I work under the guidance of Professor Fuller. And let's get started. All right, so I have divided my talk in 2 parts. First is motivation of working on this. Second, principle of trimming. Third is methods of trimming. And finally, some results. So Yash has already gone a lot of detail into applications. I'm just going to skip that. But yeah, we can use these robots for search and rescue operations, for artificial pollinations, and for space exploration. Okay. Now let's get to trimming, principle of trimming. So first, I would like to tell you guys what is trimming. And for that, it is always easier for me to show that with the video. So I'm just going to play these. All right, so I just played 2 videos. The first one is an untrimmed flight. The second one is a trimmed flight. You can see the difference already that an untrimmed fly takes off and it tumbles, while a trimmed fly takes off straight upright. Now, my study was how do we get from the left part of the video to the right part of the video. And for that, we need to understand what is happening on the left part. And you can see that there is a torque that is acting on this robot, which we call bias torque. And in this study, we would try to estimate what this bias torque is and then correct for it. And this bias torque is usually generated due to 4 things. One is because of manufacturing inconsistencies. Because these robots are made by hands and assembled by hands, there is a lot of inconsistency in between one actuator and the other. So if they both flap at the same frequency and same amplitude, they won't necessarily produce same lift. So because of that, there would be different torques that would be there. And second thing, the manufacturing system that we have is susceptible to wear. So if we have even flights of 20 seconds, 30 seconds, we see the performance of robot changing. I would not say 20 seconds, I'd say like at least 10 minutes. But we would see the performance of robot changing in that. And that's when these bias torques come in. Third, if there is a damage to the robots, since they are so tiny, made by hands, they are also susceptible to a lot of damage. And if we put a sensor on board, just like Yash introduced, then if that sensor is not right at the center of mass, then there would be a bias torque because of that. So we needed a device that can correct for that in these small platforms. All right, so we'll correct for that using some trim torques. And now you can argue, why would you need a trim torque if you have a controller that is already controlling these robots? Then that can correct for those trim torques. But the problem with these robots are they have really fast dynamics. They are not like quad rotors. They are manually assembled. So by the time that the controller would actually correct for it, this robot would have already crashed into the ground or flew out of mocap arena or probably hit an obstacle. And also we have some limited control authority in this piezoelectric actuators that you can see in this video. All right, so how do we generate this trim torques? The way we generate lift in this robot is by flapping wings, right? We give it some sinusoidal signal, and proportional to the amplitude, it flaps its wings. So if you flap one wing harder than the other, you can have a roll torque. But if you flap one wing in both the wings in front or behind the body of the robot, you can have some pitch torques. So that's how we introduce these trim torques. All right, now let's talk about methods of trimming. So until now, the methods that were used for trimming is like trial and error. So we would just look at the videos and see where the robot is going, and then we'll try to fix it by just looking at the video. Let's say, you look at the video, you feel like, oh, it seems like a 2 volts of difference. I'll just give it some 2 volts of signal and see if that corrects for it. Then you do more iterations, and maybe it would, maybe it won't. So that's why we needed a standardized way to fix that. So pros of this method is no special equipment needed, setup time is minimum, but the cons are it's inaccurate, it can involve crash, and it's also very time consuming. So that's why we came up with automatic trimming. And the principle of operation relies on the fact that the device constrained the robot to rotate around a single axis while keeping all the other degrees of freedom fixed. So this axis is subject to a spring-like restoring force so that the robot remains upright at equilibrium. And in our device, there are 2 such axes, pitch and roll, so that both can be trimmed simultaneously. Okay, so then we have some design considerations that we needed to take care of when designing this. So one was that joints should have minimum friction. So oh, I missed that. So that's why we introduced some flexure joints that have negligible frictions, unlike pin joints, and they are simple to manufacture. Second was, so before introducing second, we designed this in a way that we have a roll link and a pitch link. So roll link can correct for trim torques in roll, and pitch link can correct for trim torques in pitch. So these are basically pin joints, but made out of flexures. So I'm saying pin joint, but it's not really pin joint. It's a flexure joint, but it acts like one. And second design consideration is the thrust vector needs to intersect the axis of rotation. So in this case, you can see the thrust vector is away from the axis of rotation. And so we need a system to correct for it. And for that, we made this method where we can use the mass of the robot itself as a source of information about its positioning. So if the wings are not flapping, then the lateral displacement of center of mass induces a torque, and we can just correct for it by sliding the robot. As long as these both align, then we can turn on the device. So these are design considerations. Since I'm already out of time, just gonna went through it really fast. This is our device, and with our robot on top. And this is our trimming controller that correct for these. And this is the process of trimming. You can see it automatically correct for any error in orientation. And these are the results that we got. And we got some untrimmed flight. Then using these results, we found some trimmed flights. And we finally tried to use these trim numbers for hovering experiments. And these are our robots hovering in real time. All right. Okay, I think that's all I have for today. I'll take questions now. Thank you. Yeah.
So there's only one motor in the robot like causing the wings to oscillate, right?
No, there are two. So there are two, not motors, but piezoelectric actuators.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Did you consider, you would add to the weight of the robot, but adding a counterbalancing weight as opposed to modifying the controller?
We can do that, but that the problem is these manufacturing inconsistencies change from robot to robot, right? For now, it's like 2 micronewton meter. Then for the next robot, it might be 10. So we'll just be playing around with the weights a lot. Any other question? Yes.
So the trimming flexures, do you adjust those manually, or is there some sort of actuation that's automatic for those?
Yeah, so I skipped over that last part because in interest of time. Yes, we had this controller, integrative controller, which was correcting for those bias torques by inducing the roll and pitch torque inside the robot itself. So those were our trim values that we calculate. That makes sense. Yeah.
Do your trim offsets impact your most extreme range of behaviors you can do if you're already having to bias them in one direction?
Yeah. Yeah, it would. If we try to do some control that would require us to reach those limits, yes, we'll definitely have some degrading performance because of that.
Give a sense roughly how much that could be?
So I don't have numbers on top of my head, but what I can tell you is the robots that I trimmed had 4 or 8 volts of trimming, and then we do go about 25 to 30 volts of offset and amplitude variation to get some roll and pitch torques. So yeah, it's quite a bit. Yeah.
Okay, I think we better move to our last speaker. All right, thanks, Doug.
Thank you.
The last speaker is Anisha Bonchula.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Anisha Bontula, a graduate student from Oregon State University, and I'm excited to share our recent work entitled Comparing the Perception of Vibrotactile Feedback Across Frequency and Body Location on behalf of my co-authors Ryan Quick and Professor Naomi Fitter. So, as most of you may already know, vibrotactile stimulation is a powerful tool that has shown promise for supporting rehabilitation, body motion training, and virtual reality experiences. While vibrotactile stimulation has been most commonly studied on the hand or fingertips, new applications are bringing this type of feedback to diverse body locations, such as the elbow, knee, and ankle. And in order to understand the design of these haptic sensations for these relatively unexplored areas of the body, we sought to characterize perceptual vibration thresholds across selected vibration frequencies and body locations. And in our effort to identify broader perceptual thresholds, we used a 2x8 within subject study crossing 55 and 250 Hz vibration frequencies with the 4 body locations shown there. Vibrations were delivered using the MM3C voice coil haptic actuator from Tactile Labs, and our methods for identifying thresholds, which are the method of adjustment and the staircase method, are shown here. So to further explain the psychophysics methods that we used the method of adjustment by having participants adjust vibration magnitudes till they perceive the lowest vibration magnitude. And the staircase method was administered by having participants adjust the vibration magnitude and clicking yes or no to see if they could feel vibrations or not to observe threshold limits. So our main results are shown. One of our main results are shown here. One key insight from this work, as shown in this box plot where the brackets denote significant differences, is that the 55 Hz frequencies were significantly more perceptible than the 250 Hz frequencies across all body locations, and they were perceived at a much lower magnitude. Main results related to body locations are shown here, where A and P denote the anterior and posterior side of each investigated joint. As you can see from the box plot, the wrist was most sensitive to vibrations overall. The perceptual thresholds illustrated in these box plots can help designers of haptic experiences to select appropriate vibration magnitudes for an expanded sampling of joints of the body. So to conclude, we tested vibration perceptions across different body locations and frequencies and found 55 Hz vibrations to be the most perceptible, with the wrist being the most sensitive. These results can help administer characteristic and scalable haptic feedback, which we hope to do in future work by observing more frequencies and exploring more body locations. Some of my other thesis work that I do at the Share Lab at OSU is I'm working on the OptiBand, which is a haptic navigation aid to increase the spatial perception of the blind. We actually have one of the OptiBands here for demoing if anyone want to check it out. And I'm also working on an automatic inflatable vest, which is a vest lined with soft inflatable actuators that provides deep pressure sensations to help reduce anxiety. That's it. Thank you. Happy to take any questions. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Can you talk about some of the applications for the tactile feedback?
Yeah, so some of the ones we were considering while choosing these body locations especially were rehabilitation and virtual reality experiences. So a lot of the times you use tactile stimulation for supporting some of the rehabilitation and things and body motion training. So those were the applications we had in mind while designing this. Yeah.
What are some of the other considerations about where you might place it? Maybe for running cables or things that would impede the experience. What other considerations do people have?
So some of the considerations, some of the previous work that we were based our literature survey on, they explored various different body locations like the ears, the shoulders, and things like that. So Particularly for joints in particular, there's these mechanoreceptors that are responsible, for receiving these stimulations. So the density of those would be affecting like how, how we perceive those vibrations. So those are some of the other considerations that you could explore in the future.
Okay, thanks again. Nice talk. Thanks again for the fantastic talks, everybody.